Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Actually, from the comments the other day, okay? So if you remember Monday's show, we talked a little bit about Jason Crow Jr., five-star guard from LA, was deemed to be a heavy Kentucky lean, and then he announces his commitment date, and all of the intel coming in says he's actually going to end up at Mizzou. And so we talked about it on Monday's show, and I saw this in the comments, and I flagged it because I thought it would be a good conversation for a show like today. So this was from Kentucky Boy 22. It was in the comments. You can find it there. He said, fellow BBNer here. I don't know if he was responding to somebody or maybe he just thinks I'm a BBNer. I don't know. But he said, look, I like what Pope has done. Don't get me wrong. But continuing to strike out on almost every top recruit out of high school, not from the state of Kentucky, is getting rather concerning. That, again, is from the chat. That is from the YouTube comments section. Thank you, Kentucky Boy 22. Sorry if your mentions get blown up here. I don't think you planned on being part of the mailbag, but it was a good comment, so I figured I'd bring it in. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this really quick. Listen, we talked about it a lot on Monday, but here's the deal. So Mark Pope, he is now, 15 months into his tenure at the University of Kentucky, and I'll give him credit. I think he has checked just about every box, realistically, other than like national championship, Final Four, which I don't think is realistic for any first-year head coach, right? Dusty May, John Calipari, Kevin Young, Sweet 16, whatever. It's hard to win a national championship or go to a Final Four in year one, okay? But he's checked pretty much every other box. Beat Louisville, beat Tennessee twice, beat Duke, beat the national champion, eventual national champion Florida. Rupp is rocking, playing big games, winning big games, putting together a roster. But the one thing that you can't really deny, he really hasn't landed an elite A++ talent out of the high school ranks since he's gotten there, at least players that don't have ties to the state of Kentucky. His first recruiting class, he gets there in April, so you understand. But the two high school players he lands are Travis Perry and Trent Noah, both from the state of Kentucky. And then last year, his first full recruiting cycle, lands Jasper Johnson, a five-star, but he's from Kentucky. Lands Malachi Moreno, McDonald's All-American, but he's from Kentucky. And then you do add Braden Hawthorne late. But I think he could be an NBA player, but I don't think he's there yet. Kind of a top 35-ish recruit. So I think it's fair to say, until Mark Pope proves that he can land that five-star elite talent, it's going to be a question mark, especially, by the way, coming off the last, 12 months or so, right? Caleb Wilson, it was a back-and-forth recruitment. You think you're in the lead for a good chunk of it. He ends up committing to North Carolina. Nate Ament, you have him on campus multiple times. I don't blame Mark Pope on that one because it was like Nate Ament took a lot of visits, let me put it that way, before he ended up committing to Tennessee. You had Mikal Brown Jr. on campus. Was that ever realistic? I don't know, but you don't land him. And now, obviously, Jason Crow Jr., the perception was because of his father's relationship with James Hart, you were going to land him. Now, there's some stuff behind the scenes that may be happening, why Jason Crow Jr. is choosing Missouri. It doesn't change the fact, though, that Mark Pope still hasn't done it. And so I guess the question now becomes kind of twofold. One, how concerned should fans be? And I think two, as importantly, does it even matter in 2025 if you're not landing high school recruits? Because I think those are two interesting conversations that are kind of different, but kind of the same. So in terms of should you be concerned that he has not landed a five-star elite prospect, I think it's fair. If you're the questioner, the person who asked the question, I think it's a fair conversation, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want, but elite talent is still the name of the game in college basketball. Now, how you get it is a little bit different than it's been. But one thing I will say, I think there is a myth that freshmen don't win in college. That's not true, okay? People say, oh, freshmen don't win in college basketball anymore. It's harder. You need the right freshmen. There's certainly more talent available through the transfer portal. But Duke was a number one seed that won the ACC regular season, ACC tournament, makes a Final Four. Yes, they lost to Houston, but they were up, 8 with 2 minutes to go? It's not like Duke was some mid-team all season long. They're one of the 2 or 3 best teams all year basically, and their three best players were all freshmen. All three were top 15 picks: Cooper Flagg, Kaman Malawach, and Con Knippel. By the way, a couple of years ago, Alabama was the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. 4 of their top 6 scorers were freshmen. I remember talking about it at the time. Brandon Miller was the most notable one. Jaden Bradley was on that team. He's now at Arizona. So you can win with freshmen. And I do think until Mark Pope lands one, that's going to be a question. What I also think is kind of becoming clear, I'll be real, I don't know how much Mark Pope is actually prioritizing freshmen. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think that that's something like, listen, you want to land the best players, but I think what's increasingly clear is like, he is not going to lose his mind and he is not going to blow his entire NIL budget on a 5-star in October when he knows the portal is going to be full speed ahead in March and April. And so when I look at what Mark Pope has done is like, yeah, do you wish he had landed a couple 5-stars? Yes. And what I do think is pretty obvious is if it is a case of a Kentucky high school kid, he's maybe willing to go a little bit above and beyond. We all know the Jasper Johnson situation. He was deemed to be leaning towards North Carolina or Alabama. And we talked about it at the time. Kentucky's boosters were like, dude, if you need help, we can help you out. Don't let this kid go just because of money. They get the job done. I think conversely, there was a couple, bidding wars that kind of got out of his price range. And he just said, you know what, screw it. I'm not worrying about this. I'll find somebody equally as good. And so the one thing that I don't think you can deny about Mark Pope, he's done a really good job in the transfer portal. Jaden Quaintance is probably going to be a lottery pick. Otega Owe is going to be an all-SEC preseason player coming into the year, was all-SEC second team last year. Lamont Butler was a star before he got hurt. I think Mo Diabate is going to be good. I think Jalen Lowe is going to be good. And Denzel Aberdeen, I think, is going to be good as well. And so I think the big thing for Kentucky is if you're not going to prioritize these guys, you got to clean up in the portal. And I got to give Mark Pope credit. He's gotten the guys that he's wanted. And I think the other thing that I've kind of noticed is he moves, and this is cliche, but it's true. Like, he moves in silence. Like, it felt like there were a couple of commitments that nobody saw coming, and there were a couple guys that maybe publicly, let me put it this way. It feels like there was a couple guys that wanted Kentucky to be in the mix to maybe drive up the price in their recruitments, right? I mean, think about the recruiting wins that he had. I remember getting a call on Sunday night at the Final Four that Kentucky had reached out to Jaden Quaintance and that maybe there was some conversation happening. Jaden Quaintance committed by Tuesday morning. Denzel Aberdeen hit the portal on a Friday. Maybe somebody reported that Kentucky had reached out, but by Monday, Denzel Aberdeen was committed. Jalen Lowe, I don't think it was super public that Jalen Lowe was being heavily courted by Kentucky. And so you had those guys kind of committing under the cloak of darkness. And then conversely, you have a Donovan Dent type guy who basically, it seems that he wants it out that Kentucky is recruiting him. And it feels like, why is he doing that? It's because he wants to say Kentucky's recruiting me so we can drive up the price on his recruitment. I think Lamar Wilkerson, it was kind of probably the same in Indiana as well. I'm not criticizing those players or their representation. What I'm just saying is Mark Pope does a lot of his work in silence. And so to answer the question, to answer the comment, like, I do understand what is being said. I don't know that I would be all that worried at this time. Again, the question is, I like what Pope has done. Don't get me wrong, but continuing to strike out on almost every top high school recruit out of high school, not from the state of Kentucky, is getting to be rather concerning. Listen, we'll see. Listen, if he strikes, if he goes 17-15 this year with a bunch of portal kids, then it maybe becomes you got to recruit more high school guys. But right now, I don't know that I'd worry.